So, got it. Great. So thank you for coming to the semi-monthly, sort of monthly project science team and science collaboration chairs meeting. Just a couple of announcements to start. Today's talk will be Claver telling us, giving us updates on commissioning. Before that, I just wanted to remind everybody of some changes that have happened in Ruby construction, particularly. As you know, Steve kind of stepped down as director. He announced that at the PCW last summer. And Željko has stepped in as director. Congratulations, Željko. I haven't seen him on the call. I'm not sure he's here, but congratulations. Hello, Steve. I see that you are here. And Steve Ritz has stepped up as project science team, a project scientist. So leading the project science team, which is sort of the most relevant change in the sense that he is now leading the team with whom we share these calls. And I'm stepping in as deputy project scientist. And for that, but also because it's been a long ride and it's been a super fun ride, but it's about time after 5.5 years, I'm stepping down as science collaborations coordinator. All the science collaboration chairs have a series of messages about it and have shared nomination form with their science collaborations for my successor. I will share the nomination form perhaps with the project science team as well. Anybody that wants to nominate somebody to fill in this position, that will be great. We're gonna keep the nominations open until February 21st. And we are running the election in the month of March. Steve, do you want to say anything about?
Hi, I know many of you. Look forward to getting to know the rest of you and working with you.
Excellent. And just for completeness, let me also mention that Aaron Roman, who is here, has been as camera program lead and deputy director of constructions, and Sandrine Thomas, who I don't know if she's here, has been as deputy director for construction, respectively for SLAC, Department of Energy, and ORA NSF. I hope I got that all right. And with that, I think, Chuck, you can take it away.
All right, Federica, thank you very much. Yeah, I think you got all that, juggling of positions correct, so that's good. I think most of the science chairs know who I am. I'm Chuck Claver. I'm the system scientist, also the manager for the system integration commissioning effort. And I was asked today to give you a quick update on what's been happening in the world of commissioning. So let me get to here. There we go. Along with the whole project, there has been some organizational changes with the what we call the Sitcom team. So that's System Integration, Test, and Commissioning. And the most significant thing that I'm probably going to spend most of my time on in this regard is the in-kind contributions, which I think the science chairs would be interested in hearing about. I'll cover the schedule forecast, and which I'm sure will generate some conversation. And then I have quite a few slides at the end of the presentation on technical highlights. So I know we'd only posted them, probably less than an hour ago, but if you have a chance to flip through those charts, and if there's anything specifically or of interest that you want me to speak to, we can do that. We're not going to have time for me to just walk through every single chart, but I provide those just sort of as a backdrop for you all to just see the amazing progress that's been happening over the last, I don't know, I can't remember when the last time I gave one of these status reports to it's been a year probably. So in any event, okay, Sitcom organization and in-kind contributions. Let's start there. So during the COVID era and getting our heads around the task at hand, we realized with the prodding of Kevin Reel and Sandrine Thomas that we needed to get some more structure to the Sitcom commissioning effort. And so what we've done is we formed what we call the Sitcom leadership team. And there's the three of us, myself, Kevin Reel, Sandrine Thomas, who deal with sort of the managerial aspects. Each of the three of us are also have our own technical expertise, but the three of us really are handling a lot of the programmatic things. And then what we also decided to do is identify a group of what we call primary technical points of contact. So you can see the list here. I won't walk down every single one of them, but they cover, they're not aligned. So that one of the key things here is this is not aligned by the project work breakdown structure. This is aligned by topical areas that need leadership. And so we have the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of us. So far that's been working well with some of the changes that Federica just mentioned. There might be some adjustments to this, but I think this basic structure is going to stand fast. Also with the Sitcom team, over the last year or so, we have had some personnel losses, which has been unfortunate, but it's not too surprising with a project of this size. The good news is that we've had 7 new hires. So we've brought on 2 observing specialists. We've brought on 3 more support scientists, and we've brought on 2 more systems engineering verification engineers. And even as I speak today, we have ads out for 2 more observing specialists and a system performance scientist to add to the mix. So we're building up our team. In the subsequent slides that I'm going to show here, between the direct hires within the project and the in-kind contributions, I hope you'll see that the commissioning effort has really ramped up almost on an exponential scale. So, next one. So, the in-kind contributions. So I think there's been some expression of interest in this area. So there's kind of 2 flavors of the in-kind contributions that are directly related to commissioning. One is the US-Chilean community engagement that we had our announcement of opportunity over the last 6 months. The other flavor comes from our international in-kind programs. This was the international in-kind programs were a response to the new funding model that has evolved on how we want to fund operations. So it used to be 50% NSF, 1/3 or quarter DOE and quarter international. And that got too complicated. And so it basically got distilled down to it's 50% NSF, 50% DOE, but we still wanted to make sure that the commitments from our international partners were acknowledged and appreciated. So that's where the international contributions come from. So there's contributions that are directly related and applied to operations, but part of the international responses included contributions to commissioning. And then the US-Chilean community announcement of opportunity was very specifically targeted supporting value add to commissioning. And so the individual groups of the individual programs, I'm working and with the Sitcom leadership team to manage the US Chilean stuff. Phil Marshall is managing the international stuff. But at the end of the day, the contributions that come together for commissioning are being treated as a single combined resource. We're not treating them any differently than, we're not treating one group differently from another as far as commissioning goes. So let's just do a quick recap on what we did over the last 6+ months on the commissioning engagement with the US and Chilean communities. In June of 21, we issued an announcement of opportunity, and the intent was to bring in from the outside community expertise and diversify the project's effort, and therefore provide value added. That said, we've always said this, and I'll re-emphasize it again, that the project will not rely on these contributions to fill core construction requirements. Those are still the obligation of the construction project. This is really about value add, and you'll see in I think it's either the next chart or the next one after that, where these contributions are coming into in a value added sense. So we received 18 full letters of interest in October. The project reviewed these, and we made invitation to 16 out of the 18. It includes a total of 70 individuals in these 16 groups who had not had previous formal project association. Combined total from this contribution is about 22 FTE. And you'll see in the next chart, it's a very strong emphasis on science verification and validation, which should come as no surprise. And so how we're proceeding right now is that we've given each group initial work assignments and some structure for how to report on their work. We're not 100% complete yet on providing a single point of contact within the project, but each group has their own PI effectively, and then they get assigned to a project staff member to coordinate the efforts. And right now, we're trying to make the project staff member be part of the Sitcom leadership team. And so in order to get the work started and on moving forward, we have to onboard these individuals, and we're targeting April for that effort so that they can actually start working on assignments, because these in-kind contributors will need to have access to project resources, and that's what the onboarding is for. So here's the list of the various topical areas that we got proposals from various groups and the ones that we're moving forward to. I don't want to read through every single one of these, but you can see very clearly by just scanning the bullets that there's a very strong emphasis on science validation. And so in past reports, you may recall that I look at the mission of commissioning in three categories. There's verification, meaning have we built what we said we're going to build? Validation is the thing that we just built doing what we want it to do, and then characterization. And so validation and characterization are contained in these bullets. So it's the boundary between the latter two is a little blurry, but most of this is driven about having independent validation of some of our data products from external groups. And that's where the value add comes in. So on the international side, I think Bob is on here, and maybe Bob, if you wanted to jump in and make any corrections as I go, I would appreciate that. I have to admit, I stole these charts from our recent AMCR, but we had 40 in-kind programs with about 150 contributions. And there are about 11 of those contributions that are specific to the construction project, and mostly specific directly to the commissioning effort. And you see at the very bottom, there are 7 commissioning effort contributions. And these, as I said before, we're now treating these as a unified pool of effort and not treating one group differently than the other. I'll pause very briefly here if Bob wants to make any corrections.
No, that's all correct. Thanks, Chuck. And if folks have questions, we can answer them later.
Okay. So I think the first bullet has already been covered. The Sitcom leadership team with myself, Kevin Reel and Sandrine are working to get detailed plans underway on how to utilize this amazing contribution that's been put on our doorstep. And we are the recipient of these contributions. And the iteration process, on this bullet, I would say the international contributions have had more iterations than the US Chilean just because of timing, but that is a very active effort at the moment. Is we're starting to iterate with all the in-kind contributors on assignments, the mechanics of how they can actually meaningfully contribute. We did set a threshold. So some of the contributions that we got offered up, sending people to Chile to do actual hands-on work. And so we did set a threshold that has to be a minimum of a half FTE. And so that's still part of the iteration process. I think for the international contributors, I think that iteration is relatively complete. For the US Chilean contributors, it's a work in progress. And again, I think I already said this. There's a lot of small levels of effort, and the project is not in a position to manage each and every single one of these. So part of the agreement here is to identify a PI, a more senior level person, and then the Sitcom team deals with that person rather than a team of 12 or whatever. And it just makes it a more manageable effort. So here's the summary for the internationals. We have from Spain, France, 2 from Italy, Japan, and Korea. Some of it's very specific, some of it's very generic. And I don't think I want to go into any more detail other than that. But you can see that there's quite a broad interest from all of our international partners. Okay, so let me pause there before I go on to the next topic and see if there's questions from the science chairs or anybody else.
I have a quick question. Do you have a sense of where all the teams that have submitted added value commissioning programs from science collaborations and clearly identified as such?
So yeah, if I go back up to this chart here. So we did get a handful of letters of interest from members of the science collaborations. I will say that the dark energy science collaboration had a much stronger presence than the rest of the science collaboration. I mean, that's just a fact. And it's not a critique. I'm just stating that.
Unsurprising, in fact. Meg is asking if the names of the individuals who are contributing to commission will be made public.
Yes, I think there are no secrets here, but I think the reason why I didn't put them in this presentation is I'd like to finish the iteration process. There's a little bit of refinement that still needs to get done about level of contributions from individuals within each group. And I want to get, or we collectively want to get with the individual PIs and make sure that we're all on the same page. And the announcement of opportunity basically said that we would come up with some sort of memo that we would all sign off on and saying, yep, I'm going to contribute this level of effort from my group. And I think once we get to that level, then I think there's no hesitancy in making it public. Maggie,
that's all I see in the chat.
Did that answer your question, Maggie?
Sorry, who?
Just making sure that Meg, sorry, I said Maggie. Meg, I just want to make sure that I answered Meg's question. And she said yes in the chat, so that's good.
And I just had a quick question. This is Neil Brandt.
Neil,
about 1.5 years ago, I believe at least the AGN Science Collaboration was asked to name a liaison for commissioning, and we did name a person. And should we consider that particular liaison type role now to be deactivated given this new structure?
No,
Okay.
because so Neil, I think the way there is this commissioning liaison group, right, that has a named person from each of the science collaborations, and so there's still a role for that group to provide input into things like what fields should we be observing, what kind of observing cadence should we be doing that would be of benefit. This announcement of opportunity was really another level up, I think, Neil, from that, is that these are now groups that, with the commitments that we're asking, that the commissioning team can actually assign, saying, we need you to do this task, X or Y, and we need it done on this date.
Very good. That sounds great. Thank you. And may I ask, is the liaison group still active?
It's been, I would say, in hibernation a bit, but that is about to change.
Good to hear.
If I may add a little bit to this, the liaison were set up specifically so that we had a point of contact with your team, Chuck, so that we could, for example, know about these kind of opportunities, right? And so our liaison, Marcus, did a great job at telling everybody in TDS that this opportunity for the letter of intent was available and reminding us if we wanted to apply, etc. So, you know, I would say to the chairs to encourage your liaisons to just be active and continue asking questions and continue to gently and politely pester Chuck and Keith to make sure that we're on top of everything and all the opportunities in particular.
I will be more than happy to entertain the questions from the liaison. Okay, if there's no more questions from the chairs on this in-kind contribution effort, I want to switch gears a little bit here and just give the chairs a very brief update on our project schedule. So, as you might imagine, there are schedule challenges that the project is facing. COVID continues to impact the pace of things all across the project. That should not be a surprise to anybody. Work in Chile is being particularly hard hit. This is primarily because it has been difficult to get some of our contractors and even our Rubin staff back into Chile to continue work. And this has caused significant delays in both the TMA and Dome. And those two things right now are key drivers in the schedule. And I will just say right now is the schedule, the detailed schedule planning is still in a state of flux. Sandrine, Kevin, and I, and Victor, and others are still trying to untangle the impacts of the delays in the TMA and Dome, because now the TMA and Dome work is getting tangled up in with the work that we had planned to do for early integration and testing. So take that as a nuanced preamble to what you're about to see. So key dates so this is based on our current forecast. So just to be clear for the science chairs, we maintain something that's called a baseline, and that's what we do all of our accounting and reporting to. But we also maintain something that we call a forecast, and this is our best estimate for how we think things will actually play out. So these dates are based on our forecast as of December of 2021. So based on this forecast, LSST-CAM arrives in Chile December of 22. The dome is complete January 23. The glass mirrors are installed on the telescope mount assembly April of 23. And then what's probably of more interest is we start getting photons on ComCam a month later, May of 23. About the same time, while we're on Sky with ComCam, the main science camera, LSST-CAM, arrives in Chile and gets re-verified. And that happens about the same time that ComCam is on the Sky. So that's May of 23. And then the installation, the startup, the commissioning of the utilities that are needed for running LSST-CAM takes a few months. And so that's why you see this gap here between May and October of the start of on-sky testing with LSST-CAM in October 23, because that interim period, LSST-CAM is actually on the telescope, but we're connecting up all the utilities, we're getting the refrigeration system up and running, and we're doing all the stuff that you need to do to just even get LSST-CAM operational on the telescope. So the first photons with the science camera is currently forecasted as October of 23. And then we have a couple of months there, and then we have the start of the science verification surveys, which you've heard me summarize many times in the past. I will tell you, I don't have a chart for this, but I will tell you in words that the current plan for the science verification surveys remains unchanged, even in the midst of all these schedule pressures. We have not descoped the science verification surveys as previously presented. And then our current forecast for project completion is March of 2024. So those are the key dates. So then moving on, there's this chart that Bob and Phil and Amanda and others have shown in the past of the data previews and the first two data releases. The feature set that's checked off here in the columns has not changed. And the strategy for doing so it's DC2. This should it says that using data challenge 2 from the DES. So DP01, DP02. DP01 has been completed, and people have been using it. DP 0.2 is in progress as we speak. The red line through the dates on the upper row is to indicate that these dates will likely change, and they're likely to shift out by 2 to 3 months, depending on all the things that I just mentioned previously of how we disentangle the interaction between the completion of the dome and the completion of the TMA with all of our early integration activities. But as I said, the check marks in the columns here that are being shown, those check marks, there's been no modification to those check marks. So I think, yeah, so now I'm at technical highlights. So let me pause here again. And with that very condensed summary of our schedule, if there are any questions from the chairs.
I don't see anything on the chat. Please feel free to unmute if you have a question and want to ask it directly.
I had a quick question. We talk about contingencies, but they're sort of shoved as they're there. If there's a point that gets used up with this dance between the TMA and the dome, is there a viewpoint on commissioning, or the Sitcom's viewpoint on commissioning activities, or I guess shakedown activities post the start of operations? Because the start of operations can be defined as the telescope points, tracks, the camera takes data, right, with a dome that follows. Is there a preference of what happens and what's being sometimes bantered around as early science? Some people are calling or potentially saying that could involve doing other surveys. Or is there a preference from Sitcom if that happened, that start of operations is the telescope can point and track, but things may be still being shaken down? Is there preference to like run what would be normal operations rather than doing special surveys? Has there been some thought about, is there going to, what the Sitcom would recommend to the SCOC for early science, given all these things are being pushed out by 3 months potentially? So I'm just wondering if that's been thought of, because we've heard words like, well, there could be early science, but should it just be you're going to run operations because you still may be doing some shakedown and troubleshooting past the quote start of operations day, right?
Yeah, so
that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So let me give a very brief answer, then maybe I'll let Bob chime in on this topic. So right now, all of the schedule optimizations that we are considering and trying to do not descope commissioning at all. Based on what I've presented to you all previously. Now, there is risk. We do carry a risk that, things push may come to shove, and some things may get pushed into beyond the end of the construction project. And, clearly those would be documented as non-conformances to the completion of construction, but accepted. And then I'll let Bob comment on what we've talked about if that were to come to pass, how we would handle it in the early months or half year of operations. Bob.
Yeah, thanks. Meg, it's a good question, and I don't think we have a specific answer. What we're trying to set up right now is a framework for early science that would address various scenarios. So the most optimistic scenario would be that the commissioning team finishes the full SV program as defined, and that would essentially mean that the system was working basically at the operations level at the time of handover. That's the best scenario. Then there's some intermediate scenario where we get science verification data that we can share with the community, and that means that the system's working pretty well, but maybe there's a few more things we have to completely shake out. And then there's a scenario that you basically implied that is, well, we're so crunched for time and we're at the end of the project and there's no more contingency, and the system takes data, takes scientifically qualified data. I mean, after all, the agencies will say whether or not the project is finished in the end, but that there's perhaps at that point more work to be done to fully engage the operation as we need it to be for the survey. And then I think at that point, if we're in that last scenario, then that's where we ask the hard question: are there things we should be doing to give the community data while we're still doing those other things to get ready? Perhaps doing some things like the system verification or validation surveys that we didn't complete, if that were the case. So I think it's too uncertain to say which way, but those are the scenarios that we're trying to develop. And as we get further along, we will naturally converge on one of those scenarios, and then more details about what it actually would entail, including how it impacts the work that the SCOC is doing, we would understand and do.
Thanks, Bob.
There's a couple of questions in the chat. Rachel asked if the DP 0.2 will include light curve data products. I see that it does specify DIA sources. That doesn't necessarily mean light curve data products.
My understanding is it will include data that will allow people to construct light curves from different objects.
Excellent. There was a lot of thirst for light curves in the DP 0.1 even. And then Peregrine asked the question about the contingency. I think if I can rephrase it, the question is, are we still within the start time and 6 months contingency that had been prospected officially last, perhaps at the PCW, where the operations start date was projected to be January 2024 with contingency starting at that point, or has that officially shifted?
So I think if I go back to this table here, so the answer to that is, I think the short answer is no. All these dates are based on our December forecast, and relative to these dates, we still have it's basically 7.5 months of contingency. I think
the way Fred phrased the question, the answer would be yes. The forecast date you're showing is still within the scheduled contingency for the rebaseline project that's submitted to NSF last year, and that's the case.
Right. And that might be relevant for people. Go ahead, Peregrine. Was that the question?
Right. So we're not looking at the 6 months of contingency on top of March, right? Because previously we assumed we were going to gobble up half the contingency, and with the January schedule, that was actually expected to be April.
So I guess what I was trying to say.
So basically, if we're still, the contingency is still in play, should we actually be looking at 3 months after March as a reasonable estimate?
I think you should. Chuck's trying to set expectations that the project is overall shifting outward. So you should just keep that in mind. The rebaseline schedule showed that if everything went exactly to plan, the project would finish in late December of 23. And so now he's saying there's about a 3-month delay. There was 7 months of schedule contingency or 7.5 months of schedule contingency. That's still the case. We haven't added more months of contingency. So now, as you said, we've eaten up about 40% of it already. So you can do the calculation in your head. What should I expect about this April 1st, 2024 operation start? We said before that with the rebaseline plan, that it was unlikely that operations would begin January 1st of 2024. It was more likely they'd begin sometime in the middle of that window, and it was highly likely that they would begin by the end of that window. And so you can now, convolve those statements with your expectations about how likely it is we will start on April 1st, 2024. I will say that we're going into a review next week about the operations plan, and none of these official dates have changed. So that's what we'll go forward. And I've also always said, we will just have to work with the construction team as we go forward to plan for when we actually start operations. And that hasn't changed. We will continue to do that. So we have a plan. It's good to have plans, but you always have to be ready to adapt.
Right, Peregrine, remember that was defined as a forecast and not a baseline, not a baseline.
Right.
Chuck, we have 15 minutes left. I propose you press on.
Yep, I can press on, but I will just, I like to quote one of our former presidents, that the plan is meaningless, but planning is everything. So that was Dwight Eisenhower, by the way. So look, I've got a whole bunch of charts here on technical highlights. And we don't have time for me to go through everything. So if anybody's had a chance to flip through the technical highlight charts and there's a specific one that you want me to talk to, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, I'll in very rapid walkthrough of the technical highlights of our system integration test and commissioning efforts.
Goes in 3, 2, 1. Off you go, Chuck.
Okay.
There's a question, perhaps actually, since we paused again, there's one more question about coordinating Noir Lab for Gemini large and long programs with Noir Lab for Gemini large and long programs based on the shifting dates of operations. Is there any coordination internally, since they're all these projects are run by Noir Lab after all?
We are talking to each other. The things that Chuck is talking about with the schedule are not broadly available to anyone yet, really outside of Ruben. So that in the specifics of that, no. But the proposal for Gemini in the same period as for Ruben operations assumes that there will be some alerts, for example, available in the last quarter of the fiscal year of 24. And I think it's too early to say whether or not that needs to be modified or not. I'm not sure exactly what, if Meg meant about the long, large program, if it was connected to transients or generally just having any Ruben data available.
I think I'm just worried about transients, and I'm worried about everything in sort of that if people were thinking about an April start date, say we might put in for 2023, but then there's no data. And so then Gemini's got to shift their proposals, and people could possibly actually have another year to think and develop those proposals. Because if it's going to be late 2020, if it's going to be in the next semester, right, that changes dates of when you apply and organize your resources. So I guess as if we're thinking of more interconnected observing resources, knowing whether it's where that target's going is going to help people figure out when they need to write these proposals and figure this stuff out. Because if we do it next year, right, at beginning in January of next year, that might be too early. And that's when I think people will be planning if they're expecting more of an April date, but that could move by a few months. So I think just getting some guidance of when do those decisions get communicated to everybody might be helpful, or that Gemini is allowed to say, we'll shift your proposals, no problem. You don't have to worry about it. We'll work with Ruben on that.
Yeah, I think those are all excellent points. I will say generally we are coordinating, but it may be that we need to do even more than I'm currently aware of. And so I take your point on board.
Yeah, so Bob, I think the message I'm taking away from this is maybe we need to talk to Gemini and the mid-scale observatories about maybe perhaps being a little bit more nimble with their proposal process for early science. That's what I heard.
Yes, I take it we should definitely ensure that we're in close coordination so that what the other Noir Lab facilities expect is going to happen with availability of reading data is actually what's going to happen with availability of data, so they can all plan appropriately. It's an excellent point.
All right, Fed, I see I'm down to 12 minutes now, but those are excellent questions and good clarification. Thank you, Bob. So let me just be really quick. I'm going to do some real quick technical highlights. I think you may have seen this picture before, but the Sitcom team is deeply involved with the telescope and site software and the data management software teams to do what we're calling this this picture, as you see, is what we call the spread integration test configuration. So you have ComCam in the foreground, behind that you have M2, and then off to the right you have the surrogate M1, M3 on the active cell. So we have a lot of things lined up to do as far as verification. The things that are highlighted in green at the bottom are things that are done. And so this is a very intensive activity at the moment with a lot of mix between local and remote support for all of this stuff. So I'm not going to go through every single bullet here, but just know that there's a lot of really excellent integrated technical work that spans across pretty much every element of the observatory at this point. And then when I say observatory, I mean the observatory writ large, not just the hardware here. It includes data management, the camera, etc. We had some technical issues with our hexapod actuators. Those have been solved. Won't spend a lot of time there, but we've had some really good re-verification of the performance of this thing. And just keep in mind this big black circular thing with the vanes on it. That's the primary interface, mechanical interface for the LSST camera. And this whole assembly is going to have to position 3 metric tons to within a couple microns. Recently, we did do a dry run of the installation procedure for LSST cam. So here you see a couple pictures of that dry run. It went reasonably well. This was based on a vendor specified procedure. We found some problems with it, and we plan to make some modifications and do a retest in April of this year. The auxiliary telescope has been used, I would say, semi-regularly. We had a little hiccup here not too long ago, just due to some utility power management things that came up, but those have been resolved. And I think the next observing run with the calibration telescope is due to start next week, I think, pretty sure. But in the meantime, we have been able to gather data from the auxiliary telescope. We're actually processing those data with the DM software stack. This is an example of converting the Oxtel spectra into an atmospheric transmission function. This is still, I would say, I would call it prototype software. It's not yet necessarily in full production, but we are now able to start measuring the features in the stellar spectra that we need to determine the transmission properties of the atmosphere. We have the last observing run we had before our power glitches. We did this sort of little micro survey of 1 square degree with Oxtel and started processing that with the DM stack, pulling out photometry, looking at signal to noise ratios, looking at the 0-point fits. And so the intent here is not to do, high-end science. The intent here is to demonstrate that every link in the chain, from the acquisition of raw data to the association of metadata to the archiving it at the data center to being able to pull it out of the archive and process it and get quasi-scientific results, that chain, that there's no broken links in that chain. And I think what we're seeing now is that the links in that chain are together. It's still not perfect by any stretch, but I think this is a pretty big milestone for us. I see there's 7 minutes left. I don't know if you want me to, Fed, do you want me to just do an eye candy chart show, or should I just stop here and let people ask questions and we can?
Well, people have the slides, so let's see if they have questions, and if they really, really don't, then let's do the eye candy show. That sounds fun too. Anybody has questions about technical highlights?
All right, so I'm gonna go extraordinarily fast here, and just probably say a phrase for each one of these. So this picture is a picture of man lifts getting ready for that camera demonstration.
Is that your dog? If not, whoever has a dog should mute.
I think it's Chuck's dog.
Chuck's dog, okay. He disagrees with you.
He did not want the eye candy show.
And now,
unfortunately, it is my dog. So here's the summary of the overview, but let's just keep going. One of the big things that's happening on the summit right now is this effort to put this aluminum cladding on the outside of the dome. So you remember last year, there was a major effort to put this underlayer of white paneling on the dome to get at least somewhat weather tight. So the real priority right now on the summit is to get this aluminum cladding on the dome by sometime in April, maybe early May, so that the dome is truly weather tight. We mentioned the camera testing. The upper left picture is the installation of one of the stators for the linear drives of the telescope. So we have, this is one of the things that's been a challenge, is getting the specialized vendors from that know how to calibrate and dial in these the linear drives and getting them into Chile, and it's actually getting installed. The bottom center picture is a assembly that we use the final verification. So you see the left panel there that the yellow thing that's sticking out is not the full volume of the camera. So we have this skeleton structure that will mimic that. We have a lot of utilities going on the telescope right now, and those are on track to be ready for ComCam. The telescope software is coming together. So here's some display screens that you see of control consoles that will be used in operation. There's the summary. I won't read through those. Camera. A lot of the camera effort right now is really focused on the electro-optical testing, on the what they call the BOT, the bench for optical testing. Here you see some measurement data. That's going reasonably well. Again, here's the summary of where things stand. There are still some operational issues that you may have heard about with the refrigeration system. There's numerous decision trees and mitigation strategies in play at the moment. You know, the camera team is monitoring the performance very carefully. Data management. Data management is put together in collaboration with the Sitcom team, something called FARO, that's Spanish for lighthouse, shining a light on scientific performance. This is a library of code, class library, that we are using to develop performance metrics that is compatible with the science platform and the data archiving system. So that has been assembled. You see some examples here of initial testing of that. And so this should enable not just the project, but some of our in-kind contributors to be able to create metrics to characterize the performance of the science algorithms and the data products that come out of it. There are some technical things that we've been working on. You just see here we've had to do some replacement of some IT infrastructure. Yep.
I think we may lose the host at 3 p.m. Pacific sharp, and I don't know what will happen.
All right.
To the recording and all of that. So I think that's a great line to close.
I'm done. How about that?
Slide. That's perfect.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Chuck. It was really great to have a good update, a good comprehensive update. Thanks everybody from the project science team and from the science collaboration chairs team that participated. And thank you everybody. And we'll see you in about a month. This is the new time for these meetings for the science collaboration chairs, the usual time for the PST meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Fed.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chuck. Bye.
Bye, thank you.